If you've been literally anywhere on the internet in the past few months, you're sure to recognise these cute multicoloured characters that have been taking the internet by storm. Oh, no, not those ones. These ones. The little spacesuit people from Among Us. Whether it's streamers, YouTube people, artists, or, musicians, there was a point in time where everybody seemed to be playing this game. And now that the trend is finally beginning to die down, with a mere couple of 100,000 people playing the game right now, it's time to ask, how did this happen? Contrary to what you might believe, Among Us has actually been around for a few years. It was released in 2018 on Steam, itch.io and mobile to basically no fanfare. This time last year, it had about 100 active players on Steam, compared to more than 1,000 times that today. The game's main player base at the time was mostly based in Korea and South America, but it wasn't until Among Us hit the English-speaking internet that things really took off. Among Us's initial rise in popularity can be attributed mostly to streamers like Sodapoppin, Admiral Bulldog, and record holder for most banned competitive Overwatch player XQC, as well as a bunch of other streamers. But the success of Among Us on streaming platforms like Twitch doesn't completely explain why the game became such a massive phenomenon now instead of when it was released, and why it stuck around for so long instead of being a flash in the pan, like certain other games. Luckily, I'm in a pretty good position to work out why. I've been a fan of what I usually refer to as hidden role or traitor games for years, and I've been playing them both digitally and physically for way longer than any of these young whippersnappers. For those who don't know, these sorts of games usually involve one or more roles that players are assigned as the game starts that may or may not be hidden. In the case of Among Us, you've got the imposters and the crewmates. In Trouble in Terrorist Town, you've got the traitors, innocents and detectives. You get the picture. After the roles have been assigned, the game pits each of these teams against each other, with one of them trying to murder everyone else without being caught, while the potential victims try to figure out who the culprits are before it's too late. Hidden role games, unlike almost any other multiplayer activities, thrive on incredibly complex webs of meta-level decisions, deductive ability, and social manipulation. Because the way you win these games often isn't by being the best shot or knowing the best build, but by being convincing. There are very few pleasures as great as stabbing someone in the face in plain sight, but managing to successfully pin the killing on the only witness. However, this intense gameplay, the time commitment needed, and the significant conceptual barrier to entry can make hidden role games kind of a tough sell. That was, until Among Us came along. In spite of its absolutely runaway success, however, I actually think Among Us is outmatched by several much less popular hidden role games, for reasons I'll get into later. That begs the question even more, how did Among Us not just conquer a niche genre, but explode it into hitherto undreamed of levels of popularity? Well, to figure that one out, we've got to delve into the history of hidden role games, which actually begins outside of video or even tabletop gaming spaces. The genre's earliest origins are in parlor games like Murder Mystery Events, Wink Murder, and Cluedo, which have been popular for about 150 years, seeing players either trying to solve a pre-scripted puzzle or trying to spot someone winking, whatever. However, these games lack the emergent, deductive, and deception-focused gameplay that makes games like Among Us so fun. Therefore, I think the first true ancestor to the hidden role genre is the game Mafia, which began life, and stick with me here, as a 1980s Soviet psychology experiment. A teacher working for the psychology department of Moscow State University named Dmitry Davidov first created the game as a means of studying his students. The uninformed majority, or the village, was pitted against an informed minority called the Mafia. Each Mafia member was aware of all their teammates' identities, while the villagers had no idea who their teammates really were. The aim of the game was for the villagers to identify and vote out the Mafia, while the Mafia's aim was to secretly kill all of the villagers round by round without being figured out. What Davidov's game brought to the table, that no other game before it did, was the idea of information being power. The more the Mafia managed to control the spread of information, by turning players against each other, lying about what they got up to each night, and making false promises, the better chance they stood of winning as they picked off the villagers one by one. But if the town were able to deduce what was going on, prove people's innocence and rally together, they could root out the Mafia and have a good old lynching. Over time, the game spread across Russia, made its way across Europe once the Iron Curtain fell, and eventually received a werewolf-themed makeover once it arrived in the States, courtesy of Andrew Plotkin. But that fundamental idea remained. I think the overriding ethos of controlling and observing the flow and flux of information is at the core of every great hidden role game. From Enemy on Board's Alien Infestation to Throne of Lies' Call the Intrigue, and Among Us manages to tap into that appeal in a highly accessible way. For one, there is absolutely zero downtime in Among Us. In most hidden role games, the only real action is during a debate or simply waiting for a member of the bad guy team to make their move. This can be quite boring, and leads to players not paying attention, which then makes the social deduction less engaging. Among Us fixes this by giving players a reason to stay engaged in what's going on. As a crewmate, rather than simply waiting and watching your suspicious friends, you've got minigames to do in the meantime. Not only does this advance the secondary crewmate win condition, minigames encourage the crewmate players to move around the map, making staying in one place or sticking only with certain players suboptimal and also inherently suspicious. For imposters on the other hand, you've got the constant tension of trying to appear innocent as well as trying to sneak up on crewmates and stab them in the face, meaning that imposter players are constantly occupied with both pretending to be innocent and also trying to actually win the game by killing and sabotaging. Building on this philosophy, even dead players are encouraged to stay engaged in what's going on. Players who get killed or kicked off the ship turn into a ghostly spectator and retain all the responsibilities of their living counterparts. Dead crewmate ghosts still need to complete all of their tasks, and dead imposters can still help out their living allies by sabotaging doors and systems to set up foolproof traps. This way, even players who got murdered 30 seconds in can still feel like they're contributing to their team's efforts, even if they're out of the game. Contrast that with more traditional implementations of the Mafia format. Town of Salem, a fairly faithful digital recreation of the original game, lasts for several in-game day and night cycles, with people doing things at night and accusing each other during the day. However, if you die early or have a role with no active ability, you've got to do a hell of a lot of waiting around, and you don't have much information to work with, leading to situations where you either have to guess blindly, risking looking like a bad guy, or not say anything and wait for something interesting to happen to you, which is more often than not, death. Town of Salem is actually let down by its digital format. If you die in a physical game of Mafia, you can just go and do something else for a while. But in Town of Salem, certain roles like the medium can communicate with the dead, meaning you've got to stick around the whole time and help out if you want your team to win. This brings me neatly onto the subject of Among Us's role system. Much like in any asymmetrically designed game, from Spy Party to Evolve, it's not enough to simply make the varying sides balanced. They also need to have compelling interplay between each other. This can be seen really clearly in the way Among Us's two roles have different levels of access to information. Take your average imposter for example. They know who the other imposters are, which means they also know who the crewmates are. This means that they pretty much know that whatever a crewmate says is going to be true, or at least what they think is true. This gives imposters a huge amount of social power, as it lets them easily work out which parts of a given narrative don't fit and exploit them to get crewmates to turn on each other or use them to worm their way into circles of trust. Conversely, crewmates are almost completely in the dark. The only thing they can know for sure is their own role and what they've directly observed, which usually isn't very much, making the biggest priority for crewmates to build bonds of trust between their fellow players. This means carefully piecing together alibis and working out who you can and can't trust, and taking interesting risks to assure people's innocence. Like the classic mutually assured destruction play of, okay, I'm sticking around with white, if I die it's them, and vice versa. Because these bonds of trust are so valuable, another powerful technique for crewmates is to stake their own life. Kill this person, and if they're innocent, then kill me. Because an untrustworthy crewmate may as well be an imposter, and dead people can do tasks faster. This dynamic of truth versus lies is great for easily getting players involved in information warfare, but it can get a bit stale. If the crewmates manage to all verify each other quickly, then they can just win the game by process of elimination, and a game thrown into chaos early by the imposters is more or less likely to stay that way. This is why several other great hidden role games add a third role into the mix, with a different relationship to information to give both teams a chance at a comeback and create some interesting power dynamics. In Trouble in Terrorist Town, in addition to the good guys and traitors, one innocent player is also chosen to be a detective. The detective has access to a few cool gadgets, gains some bonus armor, and most importantly of all, gets a special hat denoting them as detective for every player. Because the detective's identity is unfalsifiable and they have access to more information than everyone else, they'll often end up leading investigations and can be a major asset to the innocent team who'll need to protect them from assassinations. On the other hand, a traitor managing to team up with the detective not only gives them the edge in a gunfight, but also shields them from accusations because of the detective's inherent reliability. On the flip side, making a player have less information than the rest of their team can also create some interesting play. In Secret Hitler, a hidden role game set in the 1930s, back when fascists were still sneaky, the player chosen to be Hitler doesn't know who their fascist pals are, but the rest of Team Fascist is aware who Hitler is. Because the fascists can win the game if Hitler is elected Chancellor, they have to balance remaining under the radar with communicating to Hitler their true identities. Once Hitler has learned who the fascists are, the game is heavily shifted in favour of the bad guys, but Hitler players need to be careful to not give themselves away, as they'll never be voted Chancellor if they're suspicious, or if the Allies manage to kill them, creating a great knife's edge tension between victory and defeat, hinging on just how much the blindest and most vulnerable player in the game knows. And really, that social stuff is the lifeblood of hidden role games. The lies, the tells, the unconscious patterns people follow, without them, these sorts of games quickly fall apart. Have you ever tried playing a hidden role game in a public lobby with only text chat, where your discourse is limited to saying, I don't know guys, white susp, and just kinda hoping for the best? Yeah, it sucks. Hidden role games are so much better with friends, or at least with talkative strangers, for a reason, because most of their appeal exists in the abstract world of social maneuvering and manipulation. Therefore, encouraging and rewarding players for talking to each other and trying to learn as much as they can is incredibly important, and Among Us's very basic mechanics achieve this really well. As anyone who's played the game knows, during normal gameplay, you're not allowed to talk. This is an absolutely genius move, as it effectively isolates players for large stretches of time. Even if you do see another player, not only do you have no way of knowing where they just came from or who they might just have killed, you've also got no way of communicating with them, causing most players to assume the worst about anyone they meet. In addition, Among Us's maps are designed in such a way as to cut off lines of sight to and from the most important vantage points. For nearly all of the crisis points in all three maps, it's impossible to see one location from the other. Mira HQ has this one-way glass that cuts off sight to easy kill locations, and decontamination doors can suddenly trap you with other players and obfuscate your view, setting up perfect kill opportunities. All this means that eventually when a meeting does roll around, each player is going to have a glimpse of the bigger picture, but never complete information regarding the round's most important events. This forces them to communicate with their fellow players who are on the other side of the map, door or wall to fill in the blanks and try to work out what really went on. Because everyone was running around doing tasks, even the shyest of players are going to be able to contribute by recounting what they spent the round doing, who they saw, and who they suspect, in an attempt to build up a timeline of events alongside everyone else.
Wait, Liz? This is in a previous round.
No, this is this round.
Liz is the one that's dead.
This is the one you found, Chris.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I thought I found Tom. For
this is the one you murdered, Chris.
In many ways, the crew meetings are a way to vent all of your built-up paranoia and suspicions to your fellow crewmates, who in turn will only give you more things to be paranoid about when you're cut off from the other players once more, ultimately forcing you back over and over again to that idea Dmitry Davidov had in mind when he first came up with Mafia. Knowledge is power. The more you learn, the better chance you stand of winning, but the more stressful the game becomes. Which leads me on to the real reason Among Us became so popular. Yes, it's fast-paced and highly accessible. Yes, its roles divide up information in an interesting way, and yes, it's great at getting people talking. But I think the fundamental reason why Among Us got so popular in the year 2020 of all years is basically right in front of us. That being that life is starting to feel a bit like a hidden role game. We live isolated, trapped and afraid of an invisible killer, surrounded by incomplete information, lies from those in power, and people looking to mislead us for their own selfish and ultimately destructive aims. Let's not forget that the 1980s, the time period in which Mafia was first invented, were also a time of immense socio-political stress. A feeling of encroaching doom and endless attempts to see through a political smokescreen are an inescapable part of our lives now, and hidden role games allow us to confront those anxieties in a way that ultimately brings us closer together and rewards us for getting to know our friends with a more fun experience. For example, a friend of mine in one of my Among Us groups can be a little bit indecisive. and once the imposter team worked that out, they managed to convince him to vote for himself in order to tie up a vote and prolong a game, inadvertently protecting the imposter who convinced him to do it, and earning some exasperated laughs from everyone else. And it's very satisfying for everybody else in the group when me and my imposter buddy managed to pull off a sweet double kill, only for me to get found out really easily.
I think it was Adam Millard as well who was in there.
Yeah, I was in
and
the
then,
videos.
and then the lights went out, and now both of those guys are dead.
Wait, what? The lies, deception, and backstabbing in a hidden role game aren't attempts to destroy democracy, but are instead proof of just how well we know our friends. And to speak personally, as someone who you might have guessed from my obsessive need to analyse a particular subject in great depth is on the autism spectrum, the act of focusing down the incomprehensibly complex reality of talking to humans into something with clear motivations and known variables is a huge weight off my mind, and puts my normally socially awkward self on an equal playing field with everyone else. This is why Among Us got so popular right now. Streamers and the gaming press might have brought the game into the spotlight, but Among Us stayed there because everyone, even people who aren't serious gamers, need the same sort of relief. I am a massive introvert and the least sentimental person I know, and even I've been drawn to games with a social element recently as a means of dealing with the stress of various lockdowns. So if you're feeling stressed out and isolated, whether it's in 2020 or during whatever catastrophe is going on 2 years from now, I think we'll all feel much better if we just try, once in a while, to stab somebody in the back and lie about it. Hi, consider this your spooky Halloween video for this year. Yeah, I know it's not very spooky, but then again, it's not like people are going to be trick-or-treating or anything, so it's a bit of a bust either way. Whilst you're not going to any parties, please do consider checking out Video Game Storytime on YouTube. They've got some fantastically animated content, including a video on kinda the same topic as this video, which came out about a week ago. Whoops. Seriously though, they really deserve the support, please do give them a sub. Of course, you could also support me instead, I'm fairly cool, hip to the kids, faux shizzle and so forth. But if that's not enough to convince you, supporting me on Patreon will get you some extra goodies like monthly updates, looks behind the scenes, and of course, your chance to get a special shout out in my dulcet tones like these fabulous people. Those people are Alex Deloche, Andrew Lebrano, Asaran, Ashley Shade, Alsikav, Baxter Heel, Big Chess, Bodhi, Branlab, Brian Otariani, Konstantin Punkt, Daniel Medjes, David Setzer, sorry for saying your name wrong, Dirk Jan Karambeld, Ekton, Eugene Bulkin, Evie, Philip Magnus, Gazkull, George Sears, Gretar Hannison, Items to Astound on DM's Guild, Jacob Dylan Riddle, Joey Bruno, Jordan Gear, Joshua Binswanger, Janos Fakete, Kai Gillespie, Lee Berman, Lucas Slack, Lunar Eagle 1996, Mace Window 54, Max Filipov, Nate Graff, NWDD, Patrick Romberg, Philby the Bilby, Regal Regex, Ray's Dad, Samuel Vanderplatz, Sheldon Hearn, Simon Jacobson, Steve Riley, Strateger in Ultima, Veritas, and Chow. Thank you for watching, I'll see you around, and have a spooky October. Woo! Bye!